Welcome to episode 8 of Sharing Developer Stories, hosted by Tech Rally. Today's guest is Jeremiah Peoples, a self-taught software developer working in the U.S. Air Force and a content creator on YouTube called Jeremiah Peoples. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sharing Developer Stories, hosted by Tech Rally. At this point, every guest is special, so I'm just going to say it every time. I got a special guest for y'all. I'm super excited about this one, especially because I gave him a one-day notice and he said yes. He is a software engineer in the United States Air Force and also a YouTuber. Just want to clarify, his channel is not only a software engineering channel, but it's also a lifestyle channel, which I'm a big fan of. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jeremiah Peoples. Hey,
Mr.
Jeremiah, how are
Rowley,
you doing?
appreciate it. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I just recently discovered your channel, so I feel like I'm just gonna ask a bunch of questions.
Do
But
it.
first, I just want to ask, tell me your story. And it doesn't have to be only a coding story. I just want to know, feel free to share whatever you feel like.
For sure. Um, so I guess my story kind of started when I was deployed, I guess. So that's 2019. I was deployed in like February-ish. And I realized I wanted to make a career switch and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I heard about development. My brother was a software developer, but I had no idea what that meant. So I got on YouTube like I always do, and I started looking at like videos. So I saw like Chris Sean and he was making amazing things. I'm like, what? This Chris Sean guy is doing great. He's a self-taught developer. He has a job and he didn't go to college. So I'm like, okay, it's definitely possible. I can do it. So I started to teach myself through a Udemy course while I was out there. It was the Colt Steel full stack web developer course or whatnot, and I just went through that for the first 3 months. And I was expecting to get a job once I exited the military in like 2 years, but I returned back to my unit, and for some odd reason, they just started a software development like shop within the unit. So I was like, let me apply for that, and I got it. So I did that for a little bit, and then I went over. After a couple months there, I went over and did a engagement with Space Force, which was paired with VMware in Los Angeles. So that was pretty fun to be able to work in Los Angeles for 6 months, as well as a pair program with some really amazing engineers. And they exposed me to a bunch of stuff like Kotlin. I never did any backend stuff, but I started to learn Kotlin, React, CI/CD, test-driven development, and so that's where I really feel like I took off in my journey. And now I'm back here in Florida, making apps for Space Force until I get out in about a year here.
Cool. That's a pretty comprehensive breadth of a story. I have a quick question about the self-taught journey in the Cold Steel course. Where did you kind of find that, oh, this was going to be that course for me? Did you just do a bunch of Googling? How did that go about?
Yeah, for that course, I did a bunch of Googling. Other YouTubers that did some similar courses. I know that Chris Sean was a Team Treehouse type of guy, but I did a bunch of research and I saw his teaching style because Udemy gives us little trailers. So I'm like, oh, this guy sounds kind of funny. So I hopped in and joined that one.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard for someone that's just starting their software development journey to figure out where to start because there's just so many resources. Like, how did you eventually? It was just more like you found that instructor that was kind of comfortable with you, and then you just decided to go with that one. Was pricing also an option, something to consideration as well?
Um, for most things that I want to do in my life, I always go on YouTube, and that's like just been my thing since day one. Like I wanted to learn how to solve a Rubik's cube, and I would go on YouTube and try to learn it. And for this career switch, I wanted to go on YouTube and find someone who was like me, no college experience, but wanted to do it. And then I kind of emulate, not exactly copy, but emulate the path that they went on. And so for me, that was mainly Chris Sean, and yeah, I kind of walked in his footsteps and did what he did, but made some tweaks here and there to fit my style.
Got it. And in the Air Force, when you apply for that position, did they test you or anything like that, or was it just a pure I'm interested and they'll teach you?
So, which is, I'm in a really weird situation because I'm not really doing my job that I signed up for. In the Air Force, they give you a job, you go to like 8 months worth of training, and then you do that job until you get out. But for me, I'm self-taught. Before I was a developer, I was just like I looked at maps, um, and then I decided to self-teach, and they're like, "Whoa, you're automating, or you can automate a bunch of these processes that we're doing in Excel, and we have this API that we use, and you can get that information too. So then they like canceled my full time military job and let me do software development full time.
Got it, got it. And how did you decide to get into the military?
Oh, I went to like college for like a month or two. What was that 2019? Wow, 2019. Is that right? No, 2015. 2015. I was
It was like 2 years ago?
no 2015. I went for about a semester, a little under a semester, I just didn't jive with it. But I was studying computer science. I didn't have enough computer science classes to really sink my teeth into it. Like most couple, like when you first started a degree program in university, a lot of times you're getting those gen eds out of the way. So again, I didn't like that. I was getting so many gen eds, and I always had like a want to join. So like my brother was in the Marines and my dad was in the Army, so I was like, oh, I can finally. This is a good time to try this out.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I remember back in high school, my dad was really trying hard to convince me to apply to the Air Force Academy. And I mean, honestly, looking back now, it is a really attractive offer. Like your school's paid for,
Yeah,
you like serve, and everything's free. But I don't know, for some reason, I guess it just wasn't my calling. But it is pretty cool to see that you kind of had some kind of military family background for you to kind
right,
of get that started. Yeah, and it's even crazier that you were able to do what you're like your self-taught journey of just learning on your own, and then suddenly applying that to a like a position that maybe you might not have even been considered for because you were able to show that you could automate certain things and whatnot. So
right.
super cool. Yeah. And yeah, man, this is really such an interesting journey because not everyone has that kind of like flow or whatnot. But do you feel like if you didn't have that course after the cold steel course, like what would you have done differently? Do you, because you said that you didn't feel ready. So what would have been that next step if you didn't have that that military like software development course thing that they introduced you to?
I think it would have been just to continue building.
Yeah.
I When I first started, everyone loves doing courses. You feel like a sense of satisfaction
Hmm.
once you finish a course, but then you got to do something, and you're like, well, how do I go about doing that? So I think if
Right.
I was to do it again, and I didn't have this smooth transition into a developer role in my innovation section, I think I would have just built a bunch of products. I've learned so much by having to do something. Again, when I went to work for Space Force, I had to learn and do a bunch of different things, and I snowballed it on.
Got it. And did you have a lot of projects built after Cold Steel's course of your own, or was it just the Cold Steel courses projects?
I think it was just the Cold Steel courses projects, and then I went right into working with my unit. And when I worked with my unit, I was just tweaking front end things, making things a lot because my the engineer who was already there, he could make things, but they weren't always as visually appealing. So that's what I was kind of working on when I first hopped on the team.
That's so cool. I mean, a lot of people always recommend you can learn by doing, but people are so afraid, or people just don't want to actually apply what they learn because they see nothing. How do I describe? They don't see that outcome out of it, right? It's just like, oh, this is a side project. But for your case, you're actually able to apply what you learn on on projects that people were actually using. So
Right.
it's like this. It's kind of this internship that you didn't know that existed that you could just
It
kind of
was
do.
basically
Yeah.
like an internship. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. And if I could ask if you could go back and give yourself like an advice now that you know what you know, what would it be?
No, you're stealing. You're stealing. I asked you that on your live stream a couple days ago. That same
I am. That's
question.
exactly, yeah. These are the questions that I have. Like I take questions that are good and then I apply it to my
Oh
own learning
man.
on
Well,
my own journey.
if I could give myself one piece of advice,
Yeah. Save that
get
one just for you.
get used to get used to failing and embrace the fail. So, like, if you don't know how to do something, that's fine, but struggle through it and like get really comfortable not knowing something and failing and having to look and find the right answer by yourself.
I think you stole my answer actually.
Was that your answer too? We're just stealing right off each other.
We're just stealing off of each other, so we're just extending the content.
Mhm.
But I just had another question for you. In your opinion, why do you think it's so hard to break into tech as a software engineer?
I think it's been daunting for a while because there's such a huge culture of people. I mean, these courses that have just come up are pretty new. in the grand scheme of software engineering. And so it's pretty daunting for people to be like, I can just read some stuff on the internet, try it myself, and I'll get this amazing job to work for a company. That's a pretty scary like subject, and it's not very seen. So it's pretty daunting because there's just a lot going on, and people don't know what goes into making that without going to college.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, you've been working with the air or what was the company called again? Space,
Air Force and Space Force.
Air Force and Space Force. And I assume you're not as familiar with like the startup experience and whatnot, but have you talked to other developers that are in that space? And do you see any differentiations between working for like the Air Force versus like a startup or maybe even big tech companies?
I mean, I did I did pair programming at the VMware
Hmm.
offices. I'd say the biggest difference is probably hmm, the sense of urgency. I think for me, I guess in the
Hmm.
military, we're really used to waterfall development, which is if you're not that's like the opposite of agile development, where you get your product after everything's perfect and they just give it to you and you pay for it, and that takes like 4 to 5 years. So now that we're introducing agile to like the military agile development, um, we're just light years ahead of what they were doing previously, where it took 3 to 4 years to get a product out. We're getting products out in like 3 months to 6 months.
Right.
So I think that's a big difference from what I need to like from military to civilian for me.
Got it. And are you still using just the new and truest technologies, or how does that work in terms of? Because there's always that joke, right? Like, oh, everything's like a little outdated when you work in. It has to get approvals and
Just a
whatnot, and
little bit,
yeah,
just a little
yeah,
bit. So I mean, I'm on two sides of the coin now. When I was with VMware, I had all the shiny fancy tools.
sure,
Back here where I'm working now, I have to work on like certain level classification systems. So we don't really have anything like I'm working with Notepad plus plus. I have to roll back some of my JavaScript to ES5. No version. There's just a lot of stuff. So I'm working with like the grassroots stuff.
right. How's that?
I was upset about it for a while because I learned with VS Code. Like the
Right.
very first thing I learned was like, VS Code. I'm like, oh, this is great, this is okay. And I went to Notepad plus plus, so I was upset.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started to figure out and respect it a little bit more because I have to do all the media queries by myself. I have to do everything in the back end. I can't bring in libraries. I have to understand how to do it vanilla.
Yeah. How do you stay up to date with the current technologies? Like, we always talk about JavaScript fatigue and whatnot.
Mhm.
How do you make sure that you are not not implying that you're looking for other jobs, but say, if there ever is a situation like that in maybe 5, 10 years, like how are you keeping yourself up to date with more courses and whatnot, or how's that going
Um,
for you?
again, right now, like I'm taking my own advice. I'm
Hmm.
building stuff as I need to. So if I need like a application for myself or just like to automate like my YouTube workflow, I'll try to like for example, I was making like a quick portfolio site for myself and I made it in vanilla and then I'm like, well, I'm gonna learn and use React, TypeScript, and JavaScript to make this website, even though I don't have to. It's really good practice for me to stay up to date.
Got it, got it. And speaking of your channel, what is your channel about?
Ooh. I'm not sure if you heard, Mr. Rally. I'm a self-taught software developer, so it's kind of my journey
Yeah.
becoming a software developer, a self-taught software developer, and the lifestyle things around it. So I like to talk about credit and buying houses, real estate, stuff like that.
Yeah. And yeah, I noticed that you have a pretty good blend of like I think I saw your video about like I bought the wrong house or something.
Right. Yeah,
And then
definitely.
there's like that financial aspect. I feel that watching your videos, you just have a natural curiosity about different things, and that maybe software development. I notice a lot of software developers they just have that, so they're okay with spending hours and hours and hours looking at the same problem over and over again until they figure it out. And actually, I describe a lot of times about how what attracted to me about software development was this never ending journey of like solving this Rubik's cube that never gets fixed. So you're always like trying to other ways to solve this Rubik's cube, and you're like, oh, okay. And then like 2 weeks later, it's just like, oh, like what if I slightly tweak this? Like, how would you solve it then? And you're like,
Right.
crap. Okay, I get what you're trying to do here, but yeah, what's like what do a lot of people do you think get out of your channel when they watch it? Do you think they more are geared towards like the software side, the lifestyle side, the finance side? Like how does that work?
Definitely the tech side. And I when I started my channel, I didn't know what it was going to become, what I was going to become, but I'm seeing
Right.
a lot of people, especially of color, like look up to my channel to because
Hmm.
again, even when I go to work in different places, I hardly see African Americans in the position of software engineer.
Hmm.
So a lot of my followers are African American people, and I hopefully am proving as a like a point of representation for them. I paired recently with Mike Koss and Reskill America. Mike Koss made Excel, and they're giving they gave away like 1,000 seats of a coding boot camp to underrepresented racial minorities in America, and I am a mentor there as well. And I just didn't realize how many people were looking up to my channel, so that was kind of an eye opener for me.
Cool. And hopefully, if you could provide me the link in the description, I could add it in the description. So maybe if they do those kind of events in the future again, that'll be something that
Yeah,
I'm
for
a big
sure.
advocate for. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And why do you think it's so hard to break into? I mean, it's already hard breaking into tech, but why do you think it's not something a lot of people of color think about when as like a job or a career?
Well, I mean, you only really can like think and do what you've seen,
Hmm.
and you just haven't seen it. Again, even outside of being African American in tech, I didn't know that you could do it without college until I saw Chris Sean. So it's the same thing
Right.
for being a black man in tech. You didn't really know it's a thing until okay, we're here now. There's
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, even I think one of the struggles that even as an Asian American I run into is not necessarily maybe coding, but just like what do you do after coding? Like, can I be a manager? Can I be like a VP? I don't really see too many like Asians in leadership as well. I mean, I'm sure that kind of applies for Black individuals as well. But I think that's just something that we just are like trying to break the barrier down, which I'm like a huge advocate for
For
again.
sure, yeah.
So it's if I could try to have that influence in terms of like better salary negotiations, like knowing your own value. I think a lot of our channel is focused around the code, but there's just like so many layers to. I know Chris talks about like money a lot now these days,
Yeah,
and he talks about like, oh, like know your value, like know if if you feel like you're getting taken advantage of. But I think these are really like hard like topics to talk about, but at the same time, it should be addressed. So it's really cool that that like we're able to expand beyond the type of just like, oh, just be a good software developer and that's it.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's why I
I
like
do, I do,
documenting my journey. Yeah, you
yeah.
get to show different sides of who you are and like where you, where you can be or where you can go, I guess.
Yeah. And where do you want to go actually after
Th-
with this YouTube channel, maybe with this career? Like like what are you like what are your goals?
this is an interesting question. So for like I think it was like 3 months into my YouTube channel, like my dream company Fang reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we love what you
Mhm,
got. Hey, join our portal and we'll have you shadow some interviews so you're prepped and ready to go when time comes for your interview." So I was pumped. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get a software engineering job at Fang. I just got to study, study, study." Until like
mhm,
a month ago, actually, I made a tweet about like I want to learn more about being a developer advocate
mhm.
and just got a lot of traction with that. And like companies were reaching out to me to see how they could offer more insight into it, and I guess they worked whatever the insight they gave to me. I think I want to do developer advocacy, which is basically being a YouTuber for a tech company.
Yeah, this has been gaining a lot of traction. I
Isn't
know
that
we've seen
weird?
other yeah. It's so weird. Like I never thought it actually was a career until maybe even like a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I guess my new direction, which is strange because that's so recent. It's like a month ago. I just started to change to wanting to do that.
Do you ever get concerned about losing your technical skills, or is it just you're hoping that the developer advocate position is that kind of nice blend of 50-50? So I'm still learning a lot of new things, but at the same time, I get to kind of show my creative side.
You mean, am I worried about losing it before or if I ever secure that position?
Secure a position like that.
Um, I don't think so. Just because a developer's after you're in there, like it's like riding a bike almost to where you're like, hey, that
Hmm.
looks familiar. I know development, especially web development, always changes, but if
Yeah.
you have your toe in it at least and you're watching it and you're staying up to date as you have to do when you're a developer advocate, I don't think your skills will fall off too much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me, actually, developer advocate position is very attractive to me as well, just as a long term thing. But I don't know if I would recommend anyone that's only been coding for like a year or two to that's really good at like the editing of videos, like to be a developer advocate, because there's still that weird, like you have to crawl before you can walk, and you have to
Right?
like walk before you can run. So there has to be like that level of comfortability with coding before you can actually become, I don't know, comfortable with doing those other things, in my opinion, because it's coding is not easy even after you get your first job. It's just like you're just constantly like iterating
Yeah,
a
for
little
sure.
bit here and there. Yeah. Oh, so speaking of your videos, I did watch that video about you pair programming with other programmers, but you also
Right.
pair program with like product managers. How does
Yeah.
that go?
So, I mean, pair programming, if those of you who don't know, it's basically two engineers working on one problem together, and the other person is like guiding the other person's writing code, so you get your continuous feedback. It's a great way. But what VMware does differently is sometimes they do engineers to designers, designers to engineers, and they just kind of have like powwows to where they're going over different problems and trying to attack them from different points of view.
Do you feel like when you pair with product managers, they actually understand what you're doing code wise? Or is it just more they're just looking at your visual output and they go, oh, like this isn't what we want, or this is what we want kind of thing?
I think I was kind of biased because my product managers were pretty tech savvy as well. Like they were
Okay,
product managers, but then they also had like a need and want, like a hobby for programming. So
nice.
they wanted to understand, and I think that's a great feature, not a great feature, a great what do you call the thing that is in, it's a characteristic. That's the one. It's a
Yeah,
great characteristic in a product
yeah.
manager to be interested in
Yeah.
the tech side.
Yeah, I mean, the greedy side of me would totally want that, but I feel that it would only benefit me because, like, nothing against product managers, but it's just like this weird skill that's like really hard to describe in some sense because you have to be like customer focused and know what the customer wants, but you also need to know like what the tech provides. But it's hardly hard to just like you just described, like it's hard to put into a certain word. Maybe it is a characteristic to be that jack of all trades and just know uh like how to blend the customer and the tech side together. But it's really, for me, I'll be kind of greedy, and I'll really want something like that because I feel that, yeah, you may not understand this code, but I could kind of absorb your information, what you're thinking, and I guess the same way as designers as well. So, but no, I mean, it's really cool that you do that. Do you guys still do that right now at your current position?
Well, right now, my current position, I'm wearing a jack of all trades. So I'm the PM, the
Mhm.
designer, and the engineer. So sure, I talk to myself.
Yeah, because I think I saw your LinkedIn and it was like it said product manager and then also software engineer. So you're maybe kind of doing a mix of everything, right?
Yeah, doing a little bit of stuff.
Doing a bit a little bit of stuff. Yeah, and then I think I did see another video of you saying that you do like you make jokes and like lightening up the mood during stand up. How important do you think these like soft skills are? Because I don't think they're as well documented in a lot of other YouTuber channels.
Mm. I mean, I think they're incredibly important. I've worked with developers who can like create amazing work, but don't communicate as well. And I've worked with developers who can like phenomenally communicate what's on their mind. And it's just so much easier to work with the people who just can talk through what they're thinking and what's in their head, because then it's not a solo problem. It's a community problem. It's a team problem. So I think it's an incredibly important tip and tool.
Right. And for you, I think you've had the kind of, I don't want to say luxury, but you've had the ability to work with people that have many years of experience, I assume, because a lot of software engineers in your space. What does it feel like when the shoe is on the other end and you're teaching junior developers?
Um, when I teach junior developers, I always think of like what I wish I felt or knew when I was going through. So like always am very heavy on, hey, you can ask questions. Hey, stop me anytime. Hey, this is super confusing. We're gonna hop into it, and if any part like you're uncomfortable, just let me know, because
Mm.
that first 6 months, a year of your imposter syndrome when you're just getting started, a lot of that imposter syndrome comes from you not being able to communicate your questions to whoever you're working with.
Yeah, and how do you think you improved your communication skills when coding? Because I to do I had to learn a lot about them myself, but I only realized that after I created my YouTube channel where I was all of my videos in the beginning were me doing tutorial videos. So it was
Mhm.
like me talking about my code, and it was just so hard to number one talk and type at the same time, but even just articulating my thoughts, I was just so thinking of just like if else if and like why like it was so hard for me to articulate. But I think that's something that I try to teach a lot of my junior developers too is like articulate your thoughts. But wait, what was my original question? I don't even remember. I think I was gonna ask. Oh yeah, how was your communication skills in the beginning when like working with junior developers versus like later? Do you feel like that improved as well?
I do. I'm like a natural communicator. Like I love talking to people. I'll stop
Mm,
someone on the random in the street and talk to them. But talking about code, I notice is just a little bit different because you have to be when you're doing it aloud and working with others, you have to be a bit more honest with yourself, um, and slow down your fingers to use your brain to talk about it.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure I answered the question, but those are the words.
How often do you guys were you pairing with junior developers? It,
So right I mean, I was a junior developer at VMware basically, so I was
mhm,
the junior developer going up, and that was every
yeah,
day, 8 hours a day.
really.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I
And
remember I
now
did that at my old job, and I paired with some my junior developer for 2 weeks, but I made sure to give him as much of me as I can for those 2 weeks, and I said, okay, after this, I'm letting you go off on your own, figure out your own projects. I'll help you if you ask me questions. Like I'm not gonna like just leave you stranded. But at this point, I feel like you're at a good spot because I think from the beginning I was just like, to your point, like ask a bunch of questions, like explain to me what you're thinking here and whatever. So yeah, that's actually really really cool. What do you think as you're mentoring these junior developers? Like, is there something that's like glaringly obvious, like that they're not doing correctly, or is there something that you're noticing that uh like I knew this if I knew this as a junior developer I would be a lot better developer? Like is there some like common mistakes that a lot of junior developers make that you're noticing?
yeah, I think it's not knowing how to ask questions, not even just to another person, but to Google. Like being able to Google something really quick, and figure out like read your error messages and
Yeah.
taking what you need to and really understanding your program, not just like, well, I have no idea how to even understand this program. Like that's something that they struggle with when they first get started. And then that's something I try to teach. Like, hey, what's line one doing? What's line two doing? What's this error actually mean?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of times, every time I saw red, I kind of freaked out more or less because yeah, I was like, "Oh shoot!" Yeah, even like Stack Overflow is such a great resource, but if you don't actually know what to actually type, people just like copy and paste and then just like hope for the best. And like, I don't know. I think I saw your short where it's like, "Oh, like what people think programmers actually do
Yeah.
versus what they actually do."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, I forgot to ask you this question. What about your self-taught journey? Like, how long did it take?
So it took me about 4 months, 3 to 4 months, which is super weird because I got thrown into that job. I was a little bit underprepared, but again, I had to learn on the job, which helped a ton.
Yeah, and how uh flexible or how patient were the people that you were working with? Like, did they know that hey, this guy's only been coding for 3 months and
Yeah, yeah, they
we'll
did.
let him like ease in?
I thought I was gonna be getting, like, a bunch of flack for not knowing things, but I have never worked with an engineer that has, like, been in the slightest bit hostile about my level of, coding knowledge. So they were pretty welcoming into it, and also I was pretty hungry to learn more, so they were excited they could just point me in the right direction, and I would go off and try to understand as much as possible.
Yeah, that ability to show empathy and show patience with people with individual that doesn't know as much as you do, it takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of like awareness to be able to do that. Because personally, for me, when I got my first job after my coding boot camp, I was paired with like a very brilliant engineer, very smart, learned a lot from him. But every day I just felt like I didn't know anything, even though I was learning stuff. But he
Right.
just trashed my code. Like I'll put a pull request and literally he would just rewrite everything I wrote. Yeah, like the motivation was not very high at that
Yeah, I
level.
was I was working with my my junior developer the other day, and he was asking me questions, and I was like flexing all of my patience that I know, and I was like thinking about, oh my gosh, when I was working with my senior over in VMware, he must have been having to do this because that was rough.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the exhaustion comes in from pairing when you are a senior developer, because like sometimes to you, it's the question is as easy as like, oh, the sky is blue. Like you just know it's blue,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
but to them, but then you have to break it down, like, oh, so the sky is blue because, when it's night, it's dark, but then in the morning, like it sounds like you're
Yeah.
like translating, like finding out roundabout ways to explain why it's so simple, but it's so hard to explain that simplicity sometimes because it's like, oh, it's just there. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think coaching, pairing it really does take like a different level of skill for sure. Um, but yeah, actually, I do want to change it up a little bit because I've never
Do
done
it.
this with my guests. But do you have any questions for me?
Ooh.
And you can't use the same one.
No, I can't use the same one. How long did it take you to? You probably have a video about this. How long did it take you to get started or learn to code? I
Yeah,
guess.
I guess I mean, in totality, I did do about 1.5 to 2 months of self-taught, but I was just doing a bunch of YouTube videos. At that time, there was no Brad Traversy and whatnot. It was all the new Boston. I don't know if you've heard of his
I
YouTube
have
channel, but
not. No.
he's kind of like the legacy and the OG of coding YouTube channels. And based on that, I realized that I couldn't get over that hump of like, oh, this can be an actual career, because I just didn't have any time to really get myself familiar with it, really become very comfortable and intimate with it. So I decided to do a coding bootcamp school, which was 3 months in New York City, the Flatiron School. And then about 2 months after, I became a software engineer. So I mean, in totality, I mean, I don't really include the first 2 months of studying as like part of it, but
Right.
maybe I should. But yeah, it took about like I would say about 5 months. Yeah,
Okay. When
yeah,
when my dream fang company reached out to me, the recruiter said, "You're a self-taught engineer. I get that. So the data structures and algorithms portion is probably going to be the hardest part of your interview process. Do you have any like? How did you go about like conquering the data structures and algorithms portion as a self-taught person or bootcamp?"
yeah. That's a really great question, and for me, I did a bunch of leak code questions, and the thing is, I mean, I think you kind of best described it, where you said like, I just wanted to learn how to solve a Rubik's cube, so I did it. I wanted to do this, so I did it. And the data structures and algorithms isn't necessarily exclusive to just computer science students, right? It's all online, and you could actually learn it if you just put your mind to it. It's like, are you able to build projects and do it in JavaScript versus C sharp? It's because you just have an interest for it and you'll just do it. So for my position, it is a front end position, but I still had to know data structures and algorithms and some system design. But when I did the LeetCode questions, I did the easy, medium, hards. But there were some LeetCode questions where I just said, no way am I gonna spend like 3 4 hours learning this like solution,
Hmm.
because if they ask me this solution, I can't come up with that solution right off the bat, and I can't memorize this either. So yes, I'll like try to figure it out on the fly if they ask me this question. But if I really highly think they're not gonna ask me this question. So I
They
like
better not.
I they better not, right? I'm just like hoping for the best. And if they, I mean, the thing about software engineering interviews, you honestly don't know what kind of questions they're gonna ask you, right? But
Yeah.
you could try your best depending on like the job description, like the job role. If it's a back end role, then I'm sure they're not gonna ask you a CSS question. But if it's a front end role, then you should kind of be prepared for like the CSS, the JavaScript, the HTML, and maybe they even put like a little framework in the job description. So you're like, okay, maybe I should just know React a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, but for the algorithm part, I think it's just something you just do, and then you just have to understand. But it's not. I didn't go into my Fang interviews with the highest confidence that I knew every single algorithm. Um, because to me, software developer isn't about how much you memorize. It's about how well you can adapt to the question or problem at hand. Because like you're never gonna be like, oh yeah, I did this like 3 months ago, and I'm just gonna copy that exact code and paste it over. You just take the experiences that you've learned and then just like iterate depending on the task that you're trying to solve. So that's kind of like what I generally like to do. Yeah.
That's super helpful because I got my DSA interviews in like 12 months. So I have a good amount of time to prepare, but I just kind of wanted some insight on your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think practice obviously, practice always helps.
Yeah.
And LeetCode questions have definitely been people complain about them. Like I've seen other YouTubers say like, "Oh, leak code isn't a good way," or like algorithms isn't a good way to assess an employee or a future employee. But in some ways, I've learned to be a little bit more open about it because I felt like it does force you to kind of work your brain in some different ways. Like I don't know how to describe it, but when you're like using a framework like React or whatnot, you kind of just it becomes repetitive, right? Like, oh, I know how to do
Yeah.
this. Like, oh, I know how to create this function, whatever. But when you're doing these leak code, it feels like you're doing these problems that yeah you may not see and do every day, but it works. It challenges your brain to think like a different way, and that I think that's the part of like why these coding interviews that kind of test you on algorithms is sometimes beneficial because it puts you in like this like uncomfortable state and like how do you actually solve it. It's never super clear, but maybe it's the same concept as like solving this Rubik's cube that like yeah you may have developed this one pattern that's you could always do it that way, but like what if they change up 4 or 5 different ways and you're like okay I've never seen this before, like how do I actually solve this problem? So I think that's kind of something that I've learned, and maybe even for like future interviews I would suggest don't like jump into a problem right away.
Hmm.
Like actually fully understand what the question is and like talk to your interviewer about like, okay, so these are the tasks that you want me to do, and like this is how I'm gonna do it, and then you start doing it
Yeah.
versus like, oh, I'm just going into the code right away and just like, oh
I
shoot, like
think pair programming really helped me for that because like, you get to talk literally through your whole process every day, 8 hours a day. So I think that helped me or will help me in my interviews.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely honestly, interviews are pretty tough, and I've already talked about it in my last maybe 2 videos about all my interview
Yeah.
failures.
I
Like I
watched that
failed a
one.
bunch of interviews, and it's sometimes it is demotivating, and I think that's kind of one thing maybe you can talk about if you as you do more interviews and stuff. It's just like I think failure is just part of the game, and just, as much as it sucks, it's like oh, you just do get a little bit better here and there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's oh, these are great questions, man. Hopefully, I could go on someone else's show and answer all the. Oh shoot! So you have a YouTube channel. You work as a software developer. Is there like, do you have like a affinity towards like front end or back end, or is it just kind of like you like that full stack
I think it
build?
definitely front end. Um,
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think it's because I come from like a visual creative family. Like my mom's a artist, my brother's a concept artist, and my brother does front end development and UI UX design. So I think kind of just runs in the family, I guess.
got it, got it. And I think someone asked me this question on my live stream. Is like, do you think anyone can be a software developer?
No, no, I
Yep.
don't. I
I
think
agree with that. Yeah.
there's like there's characteristics of it that or characteristics of a software developer that you need, like that curiosity, that um, ability to be okay with not knowing, but you're still wanting to know more, even though you feel stupid. It's just that it's a certain type of person that can thrive in that type of environment of constant learning.
Right. And I'm like thinking about making a future video about this. I don't really know how to word it, but I just feel that a lot of people that do are having a hard time with software development. They're kind of thinking of it like checking off a list. Like like you take it's like college or maybe even high school where you're just taking a bunch of courses and
Hmm.
like you're just saying like as long as I get these courses done, I'll get a degree. But in software development, you can't just be like, "Oh, I'll take a bunch of these courses and I'll become a software engineer." I think they
Right.
just think it's so black and white, but it's so not. And it's really hard to describe what that is. Like, I think people are just so used to like this older way of learning. It's like, "Oh, I just need to take classes and then I'll become a
Yeah.
software
Once you
engineer." It's
once you
like,
know it, you're good to go. Then you
yeah,
can work anywhere.
yeah. And like we just talked about this, even in the interview process is so. I hate it and I love it at the same time, in a sense that like they just test your skills. Like you can't just be like, "Oh, I'm a motivate." I mean, of course, those soft skills and like the desire to be part of that team and your interest in the product is important. But like weirdly enough, with software engineering, it's like if you don't know how to code, you might not get the job.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
had a. I'm
it
thinking I'm gonna find one of my my developer advocate friends and get with them to see what those interviews are like because the recruiters who I was speaking with from the developer advocate positions were like it's one data structured and algorithm question, and then like three other on the spot talks about something. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I'll
yeah.
try to look it up on YouTube. But there's not much stuff on YouTube, so
Yeah, that's true. And do you yeah, like I know I we talked about this and I said something along the lines like you should be like a software developer a little bit first before you get into that advocate position. Do you feel like you're in a good spot at this point to like be eligible for those kind of things in your personal opinion for yourself?
I think so, especially with
Yeah.
this last year I have, where it's kind of I really just work and do whatever I want at my job, which is kind of weird. And they're just like,
Yeah.
hopefully you're doing something good. So for my last year, I think if I get fixate on something, I can get my head around it. I can dig deep into it, and I can become a subject matter expert on it and be a representative for that thing that I'm passionate about. So I think I can do it.
Right. I mean, I truly believe you can as well, and it definitely takes like a mix of technical skills and maybe even like a personality. Because I know you do streaming on like Twitch, and you how often do you do that actually?
Oh, whenever I can remember to do it, like maybe like once a week or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you're a developer advocate, you're probably gonna have to pump up the content.
Pump up those numbers. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
if
you know what? That's crazy. Actually, one of the things that I noticed is like you don't post as much as I thought on YouTube, but dude, you would blow up like I think you get 100K really quickly if you just do like once a week or
I
something. But
think so,
maybe
yeah.
maybe it's the quality over quantity. I don't know.
No, I'm definitely all about like the getting content out there.
Yeah,
But I don't know what happens to me. Sometimes I just get unmotivated and it's hard. Like for this video I'm working on now, I've had like the biggest fear because I was telling you earlier, it's a vlog style and I'm not really used to that. So
yeah.
I've been super scared of like just even touching the content. But I think I need to go back to what I taught myself earlier and just fail quick and fail often, just keep learning and growing. And that's the best way to grow your skills.
Yeah, I think what's cool about at least the YouTube community is like everyone's kind of encouraging with one another. Like, did you have that kind of support system too when you were like learning how to code?
Mm, Not originally. No.
Not
I
really.
mean, my brother coded, but like I'd reach out to him once a month or once every couple of months. I was like, "Hey, I made a to-do list." And he'd be like, "Cool." And then I come back to him in a couple of months and, "Hey, I know what Node is." And then that was basically the support system. And he would just get excited and we'd talk for a little bit, but that was basically it.
No, yeah, definitely. Oh, I really, yeah, I think a developer relations position for a lot of YouTubers actually is a really good transition because it's kind of that blend that we're actually doing now. In some ways, we are developer relations. In some aspect, we may not be officially working for a company, but I could still argue, like depending on like a tutorial you make, maybe a developer relations for Facebook because you talk about React code, or I know Chris is doing the New Relic stuff, and I think when I was talking to Colby, he was doing some other DevRel. So a lot of DevRels that are also YouTubers. So I'm gonna be on the lookout for you. I know like Facebook, Amazon, actually all the FANG companies have DevRel roles. I noticed, maybe
Hmm.
not Netflix, but um,
Yeah, I haven't seen any for Netflix actually. Now that you
Netflix,
mention it,
yeah, yeah. But I know even like MongoDB has one, so I think that's kind of pretty cool too. So
yeah.
yeah, definitely be on the lookout for that. But I like to end every episode with like a closing theme or question, and for you, I want to ask. I think I get this vibe that a lot of self-taught developer stories, specifically success stories, are pretty rare because no one really likes to talk about their success. Like, a lot of times people are saying like, "Oh, I feel like giving up. I feel like giving up," and so you see a lot more failure stories on the forums, at least. What was it that kept you going on this journey, especially when there were times where I'm sure you wanted to give up?
Um, Two things. For me personally, I'm a pretty competitive person, and I like challenges, and um, usually I can pick something up and I'm like, oh, cool. Well, now I'm pretty good at it, and that's been the way for a lot of things in my life for like a while until I started to learn software development, and it was like the best challenge I've ever had because it never ends. Kind of bad to say, it never like a never ending challenge. So that as far as software development, continuing to like engage my brain day in and day out. I love that about it, to where um, I don't really need any external motivation than just, hey, how do I figure this out? And there's always a constant problem changing. And then staying motivated while I was doing that, I would look up to people on YouTube, Chris Shaw and all these YouTubers that were making it happen and getting better day in day out, and that it is possible. And seeing that, I think that's another thing that motivated me to keep working.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really, I mean, two good advices for sure. I think people are just too quick. I said this in a lot of my other videos, but people are just want the results right now. They want it yesterday. But with this journey, it's actually, I think the people that are able to succeed are the ones that are able to like persevere and just kind of get over that hump, because it's definitely not easy. And like sometimes I think so many people, they think that when they're debugging for 2, 3, 4 hours, they feel like a failure because they ask themselves, oh, why did it take so long? But they don't see it from the glass half full side where, hey, now that you know this, you're never going to run into this mistake again. And if you do run
Yeah,
into this mistake, you'll know how to debug it significantly faster. So I think that hindsight, that they don't realize that, hey, this is actually part of a software developer journey, is something that I like to just like emphasize a lot, because everyone goes through struggles, and it's
right.
just how you deal with it is the most important part. But yeah, this was super amazing, Jeremiah, and it's really cool chatting with you. And like I said, I don't know about you, man. As big as your channel already is, with like I think 40 videos, if you keep pumping out content, man, I really feel like you're gonna hit 100K in
Okay,
no time.
fine.
And
I'll post some more
yeah,
video only because you asked though so nicely. I'll pump out some more content.
yeah, and then I'm gonna be like, oh, at 2,000 subscribers, hopefully by then I'll be like, oh shoot, remember me, remember. But
Perfect.
no, honestly, thanks for coming on, and any of you that aren't following Jeremiah, please make sure to follow him on YouTube. I'll add his YouTube channel on the bottom in the description. And for everyone else, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
See you.